Hello, guys. Welcome to this edition of Georgia Tech Football. This is the first podcast I'm doing. My name is Thomas Chang, and based off our Facebook discussion this morning, I'm going to be talking about these next 5 topics and going over them, going in depth about each one. I did a lot of research and data analysis on each topic so that I could be prepared for this. So the 5 that we're going to talk about today is Paul Johnson's legacy at Georgia Tech, the new coach that could be coming in very soon, the hype around that, the discussion, the options, you name it. I'm going to talk about it. The bowl game matchup against Minnesota and PJ Fleck, big time matchup. Last bowl game under Paul Johnson, so hopefully we can get a good game there. I'm going to talk about recruiting, how it can possibly be affected and what new recruits we can expect to see, not only this year but the years to come. And then the 5th topic is our seniors that are going out this year and the freshmen that are coming in next year that are going to deal with the new coaching change. And I'm going to go into depth with all that. So the first topic I want to talk about is Coach Paul Johnson. So Coach Paul Johnson accepted the Georgia Tech job on December 7th, 2007, coming off some not so good years with Chan Gailey, very up, very down, very mediocre, if that's what you want to call it. 7-6, 7-5, not terrible. We're going to bowl games, but not the best either. We're losing to Georgia. It was just a mess. So December 7th, he was hired. So let's talk about the 2008 year. So Coach Paul Johnson entered this year with Chan, if you want to call him Chan Gailey's team. And that's what a lot of people refer to as Paul Johnson was only good the first few years with Chan Gailey's recruits. So let's take a look at the numbers here. So in 2008, Georgia Tech went 9-4 in total, and they were 5-3 in the ACC, which is not bad. That's very good compared to the last few years, but prior to that. And that ended up with a Chick-fil-A, a bowl in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, and they played LSU during that time, and wasn't the best result in the bowl game, but the fact that they got there showed improvement among, the offense, the defense, even though they were still, quote unquote, Chan Gailey's recruits, you could see that the transition from that pro style swinging around offense to the option run heavy offense proved to pay off nice. Some signature wins against Florida State, some wins at home. That was a crazy game. A real up year for Georgia Tech after that. Jonathan Dwyer, Josh Nesbitt, Demarius Thomas. This was their first year in the offense, and a lot of improvement that you can see from them, and a lot of good things came from that. And you can't forget that game, that win against Georgia in Athens. Paul Johnson's first year at Tech, he gets one win at Athens. He's looking real good. It didn't matter that bowl game as much. The fact that he got there was good. The fact that he beat Georgia was even better. Big time year for the Jackets that year. And let's fast forward to 2009. So I'm just going to go over the more significant years that Paul Johnson was here. I'm going to touch on the good ones. I'm going to touch on one of the bad ones. Just kind of just bring together Paul Johnson's tenure at Georgia Tech with the good ones. I'm not really going to necessarily focus on the bad ones, like 2010, 7-7, they made it to the ACC championship, but, there was North Carolina and all this stuff was all kind of scandals going on with them, so they couldn't make it. No postseason ban for them. So 2009, so here we go. So 2009 was an even better year. 10-3 on the year. Talk about a season for Paul Johnson. 10-3 on the year, 7-1 in the conference. They were 10-1 at one point, and they played Georgia at home, and I'm sure we all remember that one. Georgia was not very good that year, but when it's a rivalry game, we've seen it in the past. It doesn't matter who you're playing. If it's a rivalry game, it's automatically a game. There is no such thing. There is such thing as underdogs, but the game at that point is pretty neutral. Everybody's ready to go. This is a game that means a lot to a lot of people. Not saying that others don't, but this game has more riding on it, bragging rights, who owns the state, etc. So Georgia Tech was 10-1, and they had the ACC Coastal wrapped up that year. They got it. Huge win against Virginia Tech at home. I don't know if anybody can remember that one, but that was a huge game at home against Virginia Tech that year. Big time win. So they were 10-1, lost to Georgia. They went to the Orange Bowl, the first Orange Bowl that Paul Johnson's gone to, and they lost to Iowa. But let's just take a look and recap those first 2 years with Paul Johnson. I mean, we're talking 19-7 his first 2 years, a 12-4 conference record, 2 big-time bowl appearances. I mean, it's looking real great. I mean, Paul Johnson started off hot, then Jonathan Dwyer left, and then Demaryius Thomas left as well. I'm just trying to remember. So here we go into the 2010 season, not so good. 2011 they started off 6-0. It's just up and down. So here comes the up and down part. 2012, not the best year either. 2013, the Vadley, Tevin Washington. Really, the only thing I can remember from the 2013 season is that big time game against North Carolina. Huge, high scoring game. And then 2014 comes around, and so this was my next high point I want to talk about Coach Johnson. 11-3 record, 6-2 in the ACC with a win against Mississippi State in the Orange Bowl. Big time year for Paul Johnson. Justin Thomas, as a sophomore, comes into his own with the offense. It's his offense now. He had a great season. A lot of Darren Waller, DeAndre Smelter. What made it more important? A win against Georgia. You can't ever overlook that. A win over Georgia in their house. So, a lot of good stuff happened, Great year for Georgia Tech. Made it to the Orange Bowl. And that was just amazing. Great win. You can't replace wins like that against SEC opponents, on that stage. We kind of quieted down. I can't remember if it was that year or another year that we beat SEC opponents. No, that was 2016. I'll get to that. So that was a great year by Coach Johnson. And his offense, with the right people in it, the right personnel, this is the result here that you get. You get 9-4, 10-3, 11-3. 2016, you had a good team, 9-4. Stuff like that is what Paul Johnson was known for. When you surround him with the right personnel, a lot of people ragged him for his recruiting, but he knew how to turn, and we all know this, he knew how to turn 2- and 3-star recruits and get the most out of them. And, you can't beat that about Coach Paul Johnson, very humble guy. He cared a lot about his players. He cared a lot about developing them. It's just a great sight to see with Coach Johnson at the helm. So fast forward, past 2016 with that win against all the SEC, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Kentucky, the SEC East. We own the SEC East in 2016. But let's fast forward to 2018. Currently we're sitting at 7-5 with a 5-3 ACC record, and I know a lot of us can argue that our record should be a lot better, and we should have been the team that played Clemson in the ACC championship game this year, and that we should be going to a better bowl. And you're all right, but let's see, we got invited to the Quick Lane Bowl against Minnesota. This is Paul Johnson's last year, but let me focus more on Paul Johnson. I'll get to the bowl game later. So Paul Johnson's total record at Georgia Tech, 82-59. Obviously, there's one more game left, so it'd be either 83-59 or 82-60, and 51-37 in the conference. So let's just think about this for a minute. What Paul Johnson did for our culture. It's not all about football. These student athletes have a lot of other stuff on their plate. Considering Georgia Tech is a big time prestigious university. Sorry, not a university. It's the Georgia Institute of Technology. It's a big time college. Don't make that mistake. I've seen a lot of recruits make that mistake. When they're talking about where they're going, I am going to attend the University of Georgia Tech. Like, no, that is the number one thing you do not say. That's not what it is. But sorry, back on track. So the graduation rates were at an all-time high. I had the figure somewhere, but I can't seem to find it. It was like 80-some percent, 86% graduation rate. In a college football scene where it's just like you get your 3 years and you're gone. Georgia Tech, instead of electing to choose 3 or 4 years, you're preparing for the next 40. And that was Paul Johnson's recruiting point. He sold that very well. But let's look at just everything he's done. Thank you so much, Coach Paul Johnson. We really didn't deserve everything you did. People can hate you, people can love you, but the fact that you came into Georgia Tech and you made it home, and we're so thankful in this day and age of coaching where it's very rare to have a coach for 11 years be at the helm and not leave, in the world of assistants becoming head coaches and using those head coaching spots to catapult them somewhere else, whether it be a bigger school. Look at the Willie Taggart mess with Oregon and Florida State. They invest a lot of money in him, and then he ends up leaving. Thank you, Paul Johnson, for your loyalty to our program and for making our student athletes the best people they can be on and off the field. And we're so thankful for that. And we thank you more, and we hope we can get out of here with a W in Detroit. So hopefully you can lead the boys to another victory in your last game. So thank you so much. And the next point we're going to talk about today is the new coach. So there's a lot of speculation out there about who's the new coach and what each coach is going to bring. And then Todd Stansbury's talking about what he wants. He wants an innovative coach with NFL experience that has Georgia Tech connection. And there's a lot of stuff to unload there. And like, let's just go over the options here. So Ken Whisenhunt, he is the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. So let's see. So here's the pros for him. So let me just go over these for real quick. So I outlined for these candidates, some pros and cons about them. So let me know in the discussion thread what you think. Throw out some other pros and cons. But so here's the pros I have about Ken. So Coach Ken is he's a tech grad. He's got NFL experience. And that's one thing that recruits especially will like is like he can sell it. He'll be like, you know what? I see your talent out here. I was an NFL offensive coordinator, NFL coach for this long extended period of time. I see attributes in you that you can make it in the pros. And that can be a thing for recruits because recruits for college football, some of them aren't, but I'm telling you 95% to 100%, 99 or 95 to 99% out of the 100% of recruits are going to college to make it to the next level. And if you have a coach selling his program to you and using his NFL knowledge to guide you through college, put you in the best situation, he has connections in the NFL. He can make things happen for you if you perform on the college football stage. That could be a selling point for recruits. I mean, I haven't seen anybody bring that one up yet. And I wanted to touch on that one because that could be a diamond in the rough, if you know what I mean. Like that could be something that could come up later on is like that might be overlooked is like he's got the NFL experience. You can sell that to recruits. Say, okay, recruit number one, I can see the talent in you. After coaching in the NFL for this X amount of years, I can see that you could come into my institution here at Georgia Tech, work for me, put some work in on the field, and I can turn you into an NFL style player. And that's just it. Like you could leave it at that. That's a pro that I have. My apologies. Another pro, and the last one that I have for Ken and any of these other coaches I'm going to bring up is a new offense. So a lot of people that I've seen, that I've noticed, that I've studied is what they're talking about is a lot about we want to get away from the triple option. And yeah, trust me, I understand where that's argument's coming from. That makes perfect sense. A lot of people are bored. A lot of people want to have a more dual threat system because that dual threat system brings in better recruits because it's more relatable to an NFL offense. And, that all makes sense to me. And that's another pro for Ken is, he's going to bring a different offense in. He's going to not bring in the triple option. The end of the triple option era will happen when Ken gets hired or some of these other guys I'm going to mention get hired, Um, he's got a few pros to him. I mean, like, yeah, he might be, and he might underperform. You never know. But if he is one of the coaches that Todd Stanbury wants to take a shot on, I say we get behind it because he may know something that we don't, or he may have some knowledge that will be good for our program. Being out of college and coming back, you never know. You might learn a thing or two. You might get lucky. That's another thing. It's just we never know. So that's Ken Whisenhunt. He's the coach candidate. So let's go over the cons now. So a lot of people deem him as the next Chan Gailey, and I can see that. His coaching record in the NFL, college combined is like 97 or 95 and 122. So he's got a losing coaching record, which is not good. I don't care how you word it. It's not the best. You can talk about his situation he's in, the coaches he had alongside him. A lot of things that can go into that. But let's get into another con here. He hasn't recruited in ages. And I say ages because it's been a long time. I've seen how people have noticed that. I didn't notice that for a while. I forgot that he hasn't been in the college football scene in a while. And, that can make a difference, Players want somebody or a coach or a recruiting coach that they can connect with and that they can become close with, develop a relationship. He hasn't recruited in years, and people can't just expect him to come in here and take over the recruiting scene. That's just not ideal, and that's not realistic to think that he'll come in here. Maybe he can, you never know. Players these days want to make it to the league so bad that they'll do anything to set themselves up the best for it. But that's my analysis. Please let me know what you guys think. He hasn't recruited in a long time. And I think that developing a relationship with players is very important when it comes to recruiting. Getting a solid foundation, getting a solid understanding with one another. So that's that's a con that I think other people underestimate, and that's a con that could end up coming to bite them in the end. And that's just another point of discussion that these Todd Stanberry should have with his board of trustees at Georgia Tech is who's the best guy that can come in and hit all these points for us. And so the second candidate here, let's go with this. So Tony Elliott. So this guy is the co-offensive coordinator from Clemson. So I think this guy, by far, from just what I've seen, is the number one guy that Georgia Tech fans want, and I can understand why. So the pros about Tony Elliott: he's young, he can relate to recruits. That's big important. I talked about that Ken doesn't have, is that Tony can, relate to recruits maybe a little bit more, being younger, getting into the head coaching scene for the first time. He can relate. He's been there, you know, he's young like these guys. He went through what they're going through not that long ago. So that's a big con about him, or a big pro, sorry. And the other big pro that I noticed about him, and that other people aren't talking about as much, I have seen though, is he comes from Clemson. This offense at Clemson is prolific. It's real good. They get good recruits. They get good quarterbacks. They get good wide receivers, good running backs. He's the co-offensive coordinator, people. He recruits these guys. We need this guy here. He's a winner. He's a proven winner. National championships with Clemson. This guy is the real deal. And I think that this guy is our best option. This is my personal opinion. Tony Elliott from Clemson, co-offensive coordinator, is our best option because, once again, another pro is for those people that want to get away from the triple option offense. This is another guy that can do that, and he can come in and he can make things work, and I believe he can recruit the Atlanta area very well. And I'm very excited to see what happens with him. But so some of the cons here, let's get into these for after. So he's young. Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword. You get a young guy who can relate to the players, and you get a young guy, and here's the con, he has no real head coaching experience. And that's another thing that might be an issue is, having a head coach, it pays off. I'm not saying you need it, but it pays off a lot if you have some experience somewhere being a head coach. There's a lot more responsibility, a lot more time committed. There's a lot more stuff that goes along with being a head coach than, say, a co-offensive coordinator or a recruiter, just like recruiting. There is a lot of that, but it's amplified and magnified on another level once you become head coach. So it's a double-edged sword here. You get a young guy that could be good, and you get a young guy that there's some growing pains too. And then the other con is, he's not proven as a head coach. So that goes in there with the young, no real coaching experience. That goes in there with that, not proven yet. And, I mean, you can't blame him. He's not head coach proven yet because he hasn't had a job. So that's Tony Elliott, who I think is the best choice for Tech at this moment. But let's see, we have two more guys here. So Brian Bohannon. A lot of you guys may know him. He's a part of the Coach Paul Johnson coaching tree. He was at Tech for a little bit and then went to Kennesaw State. The pros here, and this is very easy to see. It's an easy transition. He knows how to recruit for the offense, the triple option offense. He throws in a few wrinkles here, wrinkles there. It's different. It's not the base look as much. It would make the transition easier from the Paul Johnson era to the Brian Bohannon era. Same relatively offensive scheme, just a different way of going about it. So that's one thing that I notice a pro and that I see just a lot of people talking about is, it's an easy transition. There's not that much rebuilding time, if any, having to acclimate to a new system and get, it takes a whole 2 or 3 recruiting classes to get your offense implemented and ready to go. Easier transition. He knows how to recruit for the offense already. He's been at Tech. He knows the atmosphere. I think that'd be a good guy. The cons about him is, everybody wants to get away from the option. I've said this multiple times, but some people just don't want the option anymore. So that would be a con for us is like the people that want to get away from the option, this is not the best guy for you. Then, you got to get away from the option and this is what you got to do. You can't hire Brian Bohannon then. I mean, that's just how it is. And the other con I've been noticing about, it's important, but it's not as important is the transition from the FCS to the FBS that people think he might be lagging behind in. It is a whole nother different ball game up here in the FBS. That's not taking anything away from what he's done at Kennesaw State, but at the same time, there is a transition. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a terrible hire. I would say Tony Elliott first and Brian Bohannon second if we had to pick anybody at second because he seems to have the grasp. He's been here before. He can do it. Let's see. So Fourth guy is Jeff Monken. So same pros for him as Brian Bohannon. Really is easy transition, triple option offense. He knows how to recruit for that offense specifically. But the cons is, once again, no more option. People don't want it. Okay, so let's talk about the bowl game here against Minnesota in Detroit, the Quick Lane Bowl. So some stats I noticed about Minnesota. So they're the 76th ranked rush defense, so which is not that good. They give up about 5.2 yards per carry. So let's just think about that for a second. Georgia Tech will be able to capitalize on this team on the ground then. If they give up 5.2 rushing yards a carry, Georgia Tech leads the whole NCAA in rushing. So I kind of see that's a favorable matchup right there. They're not good against the run. Georgia Tech is. So let's look at the points per game, opponents' points per game. So Minnesota scores about 28.5 points per game. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, scores about 35. With big games against Bowling Green and Louisville that bumped that up a little bit, but they score about 35.1 points per game. Minnesota gives up roughly 27.9 points a game. They played Ohio State. They played some big-time teams. They got scored on. Nebraska was another one that scored on them pretty easily. Their points per game isn't terrible. Our opponent's points per game isn't terrible. Georgia Tech gives up about 28.9 points per game. So when you look at it, mathematically speaking, Georgia Tech has a better plus minus, a margin of scoring. That's just given. Minnesota's pretty good though. Let's look at their players. So I did some research on some of the players they have and their passing and rushing and receiving guys. And so their passing is Zach Annexstad. So this guy, from what I understand, got injured in a game earlier this year. He threw for 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 7 picks earlier in the year. And then he had some injury earlier this year. And then another guy, Tyler Morgan, came in. He's a true freshman. Came in. He's come in the second part of the year. And he's thrown for 1,200 yards as well, roughly 7 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. So what I noticed here is that their quarterbacks, yeah, they're good, but their touchdown to interception ratio with both of them isn't that great. They look like they don't maybe not throw that many touchdowns. They could make some mistakes, but their rushing is a bright spot for them. Ibrahim, one of their running backs, has 171 carries for 936 yards and 7 touchdowns on the year. So they're a pretty good running team. They can run the ball. That's what I'm nervous about with Georgia Tech on their defenses. Obviously it's a whole different type of ball game, but Elijah Holyfield, DeAndre Swift on Georgia just really diced up our defense. So that's going to be a big contributing part, is how they can stop the run. Then they're receiving. They have a pretty good guy out there. Johnson as a wide receiver, 74 receptions for 1,100 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. This guy's pretty good. He's a junior wide receiver. He's got some talent. He's not that big. He's not as big. He's 6'2", 200-some pounds. He looks like he may be a speedster. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that much tape on him, but this is a good guy. They're going to have to watch out for that on the corners. And, the defense is going to have to be able to not be so soft in coverage and really be able to get on these guys. So that's the other aspect. Minnesota overall looks like a pretty good team. It's going to be a pretty good matchup. I feel if Georgia Tech, as in all their games, can dictate the run, or can run with ease and dictate the tempo of the game and hold the ball, this would be a good game for us and Paul Johnson to go out on a good note. And I think it'll be a good game. My prediction, somewhere 28-17, 35-21 Tech sort of area. I see Georgia Tech putting points up on the board, giving up a few, but scoring enough where it'll be comfortable enough win. So the next aspect I'm going to talk about today is recruiting. I did a lot of research on this because this is a big-time aspect of Georgia Tech football, is the argument Georgia Tech football and their standards are too high. So let's dig into the facts that I found out here. So I did a lot of research here. I'm going to post the graphic on this video. But basically what I noticed is, among all this, is I did a research, and it was from the 2016 year. And there was a lot of different stats that came out. It was talking about majors in college diversity among school. So let me just tell you what I found out. So So here's what it says from Bleacher Report. This is from 2016, but I'm sure it's probably similar. It's still the same thing, almost very similar. So here, as I quote from Bleacher Report, a large number of players at several schools are listed as online students that are enrolled in the School of Arts and Sciences. Or in the case of a few players at Notre Dame, I know they're not in our conference, but they included them in the article, the School of Arts and Letters. The biggest individual major in the ACC that the college football teams in the ACC major in is communication, with exploratory studies and business falling closely behind. So let me go into a bit of these numbers here. So Clemson, so I looked at the top tier ACC teams and I looked at what they major in, what their most common major is. So let me tell you what I found. So Clemson, just like Georgia Tech, business. So here's the part, folks, that I'm having a problem with understanding is Clemson student athletes their football team majors in the same thing as Georgia Tech. They both major in business and business administration. I don't know what the difference would be between the two. I know there is some difference, but Clemson majors in business. Let's see, Florida State is social sciences. Louisville, I'm not saying they're a top tier team, but they were good with Lamar Jackson, majors in communication. Miami, we can kind of expect this with Miami football players. They're really not going to school. Arts and sciences. That's not a knock on arts and sciences at all by any means. But compared to the top tier ACC, or not even the top tier ACC, the top tier country schools in the country, their majors for football are better than arts and science. They're harder. There's more work involved. Let's see. So Virginia Tech is business as well. So the thing I'm doing here that I'm having a hard time understanding is why can Clemson, their players all major in business, and look at them, they're a national championship team every year, and why can Georgia Tech's players major in the same thing, but all of a sudden it's like a selling point for schools is like, oh, Georgia Tech's harder to get into, come here and we'll help you out. So here's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not too good with this, or I'm not too updated on this, but I know at Georgia Tech, getting in for students is the hard part. The requirements to get in, the ACT scores, the SAT scores, the GPA, I understand. But if colleges like Clemson, which have high academic standards as well, can make it happen, I don't understand why we can't. And recruiting is where we're lacking the hardest. That's what we're gonna have to come up with is some good recruiting here. Recruiting's important to us. It's what's gonna get us from being a mediocre team with, like, I deem them as athletes, to a team with athletes that can compete in championships every year. And you know, stars in the end of things, if you look in the NFL, NFL players and their stars, a lot of them weren't that good and weren't that highly recruited out of high school. Some good NFL players weren't that high stars. But let's look at it this way. I'd rather take my chance on a 5-star with his proven ability. I want 4 and 5 stars over 2 and 3 stars. And let me tell you why. Is because there is an extra layer of talent that maybe the 2 and 3 stars don't have. Don't get me wrong. 2 and 3 stars are what make up the backbone of Georgia Tech football the last few years, and we've had some great years. But I think, to be honest, if we want to start separating ourselves from the lower level tier of the ACC, is we're going to have to get competitive in recruiting. And we talked about the budget, how Georgia Tech's budget's so low. That's going to change. Todd Stanberry's got a plan for that. The facilities need to be updated. There's a lot that has to go into this. It's not just academics. But don't get me wrong, though. A lot of it is academics, but a lot of it also has to deal with the budget, facilities, and yeah, that's really much it. Academics is a huge part, but budget and facilities, if those are up, players are going to be more interested. So that's what I noticed. I noticed a lot about that, and looking at the common majors at different colleges, Clemson, Virginia Tech, teams that we deem as higher, even though Virginia Tech wasn't as good this year, higher level ACC talented teams all major in business. And Georgia Tech can do it. If Clemson and Virginia Tech can do it, and they've been good, then Georgia Tech can do it too. And that's so. Let me know down in the comments what you think. I'd love to hear what you think about that. I'm gonna post the figure on Facebook, so that you can see it. I'm gonna give the link to the website so you can do your own research. But what I found out is, like, top tier schools are majoring in business, and the teams that are like Miami, that are good, that have been good, major in, as we can expect, teams like that major in things that aren't as hard. So let's just move on from that. I'd like to hear what you guys think about that based off the information I shared and the information I'm going to share with the link. So the last topic I'm going to talk about today is seniors that are going and freshmen that are coming. And one more thing before I talk about that, or actually, let me just get into this. So the seniors, I just listed some notable ones. So we have Quay Searcy, Lamont Simmons, Victor Alexander, Christian Campbell, Taquan Marshall, Clinton Lynch, Jalen Johnson, Trey Jackson, Malik Rivera, Brant Mitchell, Brad Stewart, and Henri St. Amour. So there's plenty more seniors, but let's just touch on. Let's just start off by saying we're so thankful for the senior class. You know, big time year. They're the big time guys. They're real. They stuck with the program, through 2015 when they were freshmen when we weren't that good. They stuck with us. 2016, a little bit better. 2017, not as good. 2018, they're here. They rode with us. They're our ride or dies. They're here. Taquan Marshall, big time guy that came in. I don't think anybody expected the transition from Justin Thomas to be this smooth. Yeah, it wasn't smooth, but it was smoother than some expected. Guys like Clinton Lynch, he's a Hall of Famer in Georgia Tech with all that. He's in the record books. Malik Rivera, graduate transfer, big time guy, leads the team in tackles, I believe. Great player. Henri St. Amour, who had a huge year. Very excited for him and his future with the NFL. And let's look at and thank you so much, seniors, for everything you've done for us. We are very thankful to have you play for our institution the last 4 years, and this decision to stay with us will pay off in the future. 1 in every 6 Tech grads is a millionaire, so it's a selling point. But let's move on to the freshmen now. So I'm looking at the class here. It's predominantly, I see a lot of offensive guys. We got a commit from Britton Allen, that safety from IMG. I see some defense. Our top guys are on defense, or most of them are on defense. So we have our top 2 guys in this 2019 recruiting class are safety and a cornerback. Our third is a wide receiver. Fourth is an athlete. Fifth is an inside linebacker. Sixth is a wide receiver. Then we have Jordan Yates, who's a quarterback. He's 7th on the list. We have a running back, outside linebacker, running back, safety. We have all kinds of guys coming in. So I'm going to do a more detailed segment on these guys coming up soon, when I gather more research on them and their high school careers come to an end, I can get some more stats. So I apologize on this section being a little bit shorter, but the other part that I wanted to touch on and that someone in the Facebook thread commented is talking about Adidas and the influence it has on recruits. So I'm 18 years old, or 19 years old, sorry. Being in high school, I played football for a year. Uniforms, you'd be surprised. Uniforms make a big deal. They're a deal breaker in some schools on if you go to that school or not. And let me give you an example. Oregon in 2010, 2011, 2012, they got a lot of guys just based off their apparel and their Nike sponsorship. You see their jerseys. Guys want to look good out there on the field. I understand that. And that's where this comes into play. Adidas is a big-time provider. Adidas was the apparel company I hoped we'd join when we got through with Russell. And that happened. Big time players. That just is what it is with teenagers these days. They like to look good on the field, and I feel like Adidas gives us the best chance. I'd love to see some gold jerseys out there, though. Like the white and the navy are cool, but I want some gold out there. I want some gold jerseys out there. Gold jersey tops, and I want to see. We saw the gold pants, but we didn't see a gold jersey. But let me just tell you, a lot of people or someone asked me to touch on this. Apparel does mean a lot, and I think that's a big selling point to some recruits is, we have Adidas as our partner, good apparel. You look it out there on the field. We got a lot of clothes, shoes, connections, armbands, wristbands, bracelet, everything that you could imagine. And, you'd be surprised at how that can sway a recruit right there is they want good facilities. They want good apparel. It's important. So I'll touch more on that later on, but this is a great first podcast. I'm excited to be doing this for you guys. I plan to do one every week, so please just give me some feedback, what you think, and some topics that you want me to talk about in the future, and comment, expand on my ideas. This was a roughly long one, but they'll get shorter as time goes on or longer, however we see it fit. But, just getting introduced. I really like this opportunity to talk about this. This is a passion of mine. So please, guys, just keep me updated. What you guys wanted to know, or what another talking point. And I'd like to make this, in the future, a Facebook Live session where we can debate online and debate live and stuff. So thank you so much for listening, guys. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. And go Jackets.